The toxicologist didn't look at me when he slid the manila folder across his massive mahogany desk. He just stared down at his own hands, his face completely pale, and asked a question that will echo in my head until the day I die. "Mr. Thorne, who is preparing your meals?" I stared at him, confused. My hands were shaking. A symptom I had been told was the beginning of early-onset Alzheimer's. I told him it was my daughter, the little girl I had adopted 22 years ago, the woman who was currently living in my guest wing, brushing my hair when I was too weak to lift my arms, and crying by my bedside as I slowly lost my mind. The doctor closed his eyes, taking a deep, shuddering breath. "You need to leave your house today, Elias," he whispered. "You don't have dementia. You are being systematically, deliberately poisoned. My name is Elias. I am 62 years old, and for the last 3 decades, I built one of the most successful commercial architectural firms in the Pacific Northwest. I spent my life designing structures meant to withstand earthquakes, hurricanes, and the test of time. I knew how to find the weak points in any foundation. I knew how to reinforce the things that mattered. But I completely missed the rot destroying my own family. To understand how this nightmare happened, you need to understand how much I love Chloe. My late wife, Sarah, and I spent the first 10 years of our marriage desperately trying to have children. After countless failed treatments and endless heartbreak, we turned to adoption. The day we brought 6-year-old Chloe home from the foster system was the happiest day of my life. She was a quiet, terrified little girl with big brown eyes who flinched when doors closed too loudly. I made a vow that day. I promised the universe that I would spend every waking moment protecting her, providing for her, and giving her a life where she would never have to be afraid again. And I kept that promise. Chloe grew up in a world of private schools, equestrian lessons, and unconditional love. When Sarah passed away suddenly 5 years ago from what the coroner called an unexpected cardiac failure, Chloe became my entire world. We grieved together. She moved back into my estate, a sprawling, isolated glass and steel home I had designed myself, tucked deep into the Cascade Mountains. She was my anchor. I was hers, or so I thought. 2 years ago, Chloe married Damon. Damon was a venture capitalist, or more accurately, he played one on the internet. He wore suits that cost more than my first car, spoke in corporate buzzwords, and constantly needed bridge loans for startups that mysteriously never launched. I didn't like him. My instinct screamed that he was a parasite. But Chloe loved him, and a father's job is to support his daughter's happiness, even when he questions her taste. When Damon's primary investment fund collapsed, leaving them drowning in debt, I didn't hesitate. I invited them to move into the east wing of my mountain estate. I gave Damon a consulting job at my firm. I paid off their immediate creditors. I thought I was being a supportive patriarch. I didn't know I was inviting 2 predators into my sanctuary. The first red flag wasn't an argument or a missing sum of money. It was a misplaced file. I have always been a meticulously organized man. It comes with being an architect. Every blueprint, every financial document, every legal contract in my home office had an exact place. One rainy Tuesday evening, I went to my safe to retrieve my estate planning documents. I was preparing to meet with my attorney to formally establish a charitable foundation in Sarah's name. The file was there, but the sequence of the pages was wrong. The brass clasp holding the documents together was bent backward, as if someone had hurriedly removed a page, copied it, and forced it back into place. I asked Chloe about it the next morning over breakfast. I kept my tone casual, sipping my black coffee. "Did you or Damon need something from the office, sweetheart?" My estate file looked like it had been handled. Chloe didn't miss a beat. She didn't look nervous. She just gave me a soft, pitying smile. "Dad, you had the file out on your desk 2 days ago. Don't you remember? You were reading it while you were watching the news. I put it back in the safe for you because you left it out." I frowned. I had absolutely no memory of taking the file out. "I did. I asked." "You did." Damon chimed in, not looking up from his tablet. "You were complaining about the foundation taxes. We talked about it for 20 minutes, Elias." I sat back in my chair, a cold knot forming in my stomach. I couldn't remember that conversation. I couldn't remember taking the file out. I rubbed my temples. suddenly feeling a dull, throbbing ache behind my eyes. Right, I muttered, of course, my mistake. That was the beginning of the end. Over the next 3 months, my reality began to fracture. It started with small things. I would forget the names of my junior architects at the firm. I would walk into rooms and have no idea why I was there. Then, it escalated to physical symptoms. A constant, exhausting brain fog, numbness in my fingertips, a slight, uncontrollable tremor in my right hand. I hid it at first, terrified of what it meant. My father had passed away from Alzheimer's, and the fear of losing my mind had always been my greatest silent terror. But Chloe noticed. She became the perfect, doting daughter. She took over cooking my meals, insisting I needed organic, nutrient-dense foods to boost my energy. Every morning, she made me a custom protein smoothie, standing in the kitchen and blending it herself. She managed my schedule. She managed my phone calls. And as she took over my life, my symptoms grew worse. One afternoon, I was walking down the grand staircase of the house when my legs simply gave out. There was no warning. My knees turned to water, and I tumbled down the last 4 steps, striking my shoulder hard against the hardwood floor. Chloe screamed, rushing to my side. Damon was right behind her. They helped me to the sofa, Chloe sobbing, stroking my thinning hair. "Dad, this is getting out of control," she cried. "You're getting worse. You need to see a specialist." "I have a doctor," I wheezed, clutching my bruised shoulder. "Dr. Aris is a general practitioner." Damon interrupted smoothly. "I have a friend from college, a brilliant urologist, Dr. Vance. I've already taken the liberty of calling him. He's going to do a house call tomorrow." I was too exhausted, too terrified to argue. The next day, Dr. Vance arrived. He was a slick, overly polished man who asked me a series of degrading cognitive questions. He made me draw a clock. He made me count backward from 100 by sevens. I stumbled on the 3rd number. The brain fog was so thick, I felt like I was breathing underwater. Dr. Vance took Chloe and Damon into the hallway. They left the door cracked open just enough for me to hear the devastating diagnosis. "It's rapid-onset neurodegeneration," Dr. Vance whispered. "Likely early Alzheimer's, compounded by a neurological disorder. He's declining faster than anything I've seen. Within 6 months, he won't know his own name. You need to get his affairs in order immediately." I sat in my armchair, silent tears rolling down my face. My brilliant mind, the mind that had engineered skyscrapers, was turning to mush. That night, Chloe sat at the edge of my bed, holding my trembling hand. "Dad," she said softly, wiping a tear from her cheek. "I know this is hard, but we have to protect you. Damon and I went to the lawyer today. We had them draft a medical and financial power of attorney, just so we can handle your medical bills and the firm while you rest. You just need to sign it." She slid a thick stack of papers onto my lap and clicked a gold pen. I looked down at the papers. The words blurred together, but somewhere deep in the primitive, survival-driven part of my brain, a silent alarm began to scream. Why did she have the papers drawn up today? Why didn't she consult my attorney, the man I've used for 20 years? I can't read them right now, Chloe. I stammered, letting the pen roll off my lap. My eyes are too blurry. Tomorrow, let me sleep? A flash of intense, unfiltered annoyance crossed Chloe's face. It was there for a fraction of a second, but I saw it. The mask slipped. "Of course, Daddy," she said, her voice instantly returning to its sweet, cooing tone. "Tomorrow." She left the room, closing the door behind her. I lay in the dark, my heart pounding against my ribs. I couldn't trust my memory. I couldn't trust my body, but I could still trust my instincts. And my instincts were telling me that I was trapped in a house with two people who were eager to watch me fade away. The next morning, Chloe went to the city for a spa day, and Damon drove out to the golf course. They left me in the care of a daytime nurse they had hired. But what they didn't know was that the nurse spent most of her time sitting in the sunroom watching movies on her iPad. I waited until she was completely distracted, put on my heavy winter coat, and slipped out through the basement garage. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely hold the steering wheel of my old truck. But I managed to start the engine. I drove out of the estate, my vision blurring, navigating the winding mountain roads purely by muscle memory. I didn't go to Dr. Vance. I drove directly to the city, to an independent toxicologist and neurologist I had found by searching the medical registry on my phone. When I finally sat in Dr. Gregory's office, I explained everything. The tremors, the memory loss, the sudden weakness, the falls. He didn't make me draw a clock. He drew 10 vials of blood, took a massive hair sample, and told me he would run a heavy metal and comprehensive toxicology panel on an emergency rush. Don't sign anything, he told me firmly. And don't eat or drink anything you haven't prepared yourself until I call you. 3 days later, I got the call. And that brings us back to the moment the doctor slid the manila folder across his desk. You don't have dementia, Elias, Dr. Gregory said, his voice laced with horror. You have lethal levels of thallium in your system. It's a heavy metal, colorless, odorless, and tasteless. It causes severe neurological damage, muscle weakness, and cognitive decline. It perfectly mimics a degenerative brain disease. If you continue ingesting it at this rate, you will be dead in a month. The room started to spin. Thallium? Poison? Are you sure? I choked out, gripping the arms of my chair. My daughter makes my meals. My daughter. I am absolutely certain, he said gently. Mr. Thorne, I have a legal obligation to contact the police. No. I shouted, surprising us both. I forced myself to lower my voice. No police. Not yet. They are trying to murder you, he urged. I know. I said, a terrifying, icy calm suddenly washing over me. The confusion was gone. The brain fog was temporarily pierced by the sheer adrenaline of betrayal. But if you call the police now, they will claim I accidentally ingested it. They will say I'm confused. I'm rich, Dr. Gregory. Damon has expensive lawyers. They will spin this, get out on bail, and I will never see justice. Dr. Gregory looked at me, realizing I was entirely lucid. What do you want to do? I want the antidote, I said coldly, and I want proof. He prescribed me Prussian blue, a medication that binds the thallium in the digestive tract and pulls it out of the body. He gave me strict instructions on how to take it secretly. I drove back to my mountain estate. The rain was lashing against my windshield, mirroring the absolute hurricane of grief tearing through my soul. The little girl I had read bedtime stories to. The teenager whose broken heart I had mended after her first breakup. The woman I was preparing to hand a $40 million empire to. She was slowly, methodically murdering me. The pain of that realization was worse than any physical symptom the poison had caused. I pulled over to the side of the mountain road and wept. I sobbed until I couldn't breathe, mourning the death of my daughter, because the Chloe I loved was dead. The woman wearing her face was a monster. When I finally wiped my tears, the grief was gone. All that remained was the cold, calculating mind of an architect. They wanted to tear down my life. Fine. I would design their prison. I called an old friend, Marcus, who ran an elite private security firm specializing in corporate espionage. I told him I needed his team at my house at 2 a.m. while Chloe and Damon were asleep. I needed micro cameras installed everywhere. The kitchen, the living room, my home office, and their private sitting room. Marcus didn't ask questions. He just brought the equipment. For the next week, I played my part perfectly. I acted sicker than ever. I slurred my words. I stumbled into walls. I let Chloe guide me to my armchair, her face a mask of tragic concern. Every morning, she brought me my custom smoothie. I would smile, thank her weakly, and wait for her to turn her back. Then, I would pour the contents into a specialized thermos I hid in my jacket pocket, later flushing it down the toilet in my private bathroom. I took the Prussian blue in secret. Slowly, the tremors began to fade. The brain fog began to lift. My strength returned, but I never let them see it. On the 5th night after the cameras were installed, I locked myself in my private study. I opened my encrypted laptop and pulled up the live feeds from the house. I clicked through the stored footage from earlier that day. I watched the kitchen camera. There was Chloe, standing in the sunlight, humming a cheerful pop song. She chopped up fresh strawberries, poured in organic almond milk, and added a scoop of protein powder. Then, she opened a small, false-bottom canister of exotic tea on the counter. She pulled out a tiny glass vial with a glass dropper. My breath hitched. I watched my beautiful, adopted daughter carefully squeeze 4 drops of clear liquid into the blender. Damon walked into the kitchen, wearing his silk bathrobe. He leaned against the counter, watching her. "Is it enough?" he asked, his voice crystal clear on the high-definition audio. Vance said he's taking too long to decline. The board at his firm is getting restless. If they suspect he's compromised before we get the power of attorney signed, they might try to force a medical conservatorship. We lose control of the assets. Chloe didn't flinch. She just calmly returned the vial to the tea canister. "I upped the dose today," she said coldly. "He was practically drooling this morning. His brain is turning to Swiss cheese. He'll sign the papers tomorrow. He's too scared to refuse." Damon stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her waist, kissing her neck. "You're brilliant, you know that? $40 million. And we won't even have to pay taxes on the transfer once he's declared incompetent." Chloe smiled. It was a vicious, dead-eyed smile I had never seen in my entire life. "He's served his purpose," she whispered. "He paid for everything. Now it's our turn." I slammed my laptop shut. I had my proof. I had the video of the poisoning. I had the audio of their motive. It was enough for the police. It was enough for an attempted murder charge. But as I sat there in the dark, staring at the blank screen, a new, darker thought crept into my mind. They were arrogant. They believed they were untouchable. If I handed this over to the police now, they would claim Damon manipulated her. Chloe would play the victim. She had 20 years of practice playing the sweet, innocent daughter. A jury might show her mercy. I didn't want mercy. I wanted absolute, inescapable devastation. The next morning, I stumbled into the kitchen, leaning heavily on a cane. I put on the performance of a lifetime. I let my hand shake so violently that I dropped my coffee mug, shattering it across the imported tile. Chloe rushed over, her face a perfect picture of panic. "Dad! Oh my God, you okay?" I can't do this anymore, Chloe." I sobbed, faking a complete mental breakdown. I clutched her arm, staring at her with wide, terrified eyes. "My mind is gone. I'm scared. I'm so scared." "Sure. It's okay, Daddy," she cooed, stroking my back while looking over my shoulder at Damon with a triumphant smirk. "Bring me the papers," I whispered, letting my head drop to my chest. "The power of attorney, the estate transfer. Bring them to my office at noon. I'll sign them. I want you to handle everything." Damon practically sprinted out of the room to get the documents. At exactly noon, they sat across from my massive mahogany desk. Chloe slid the documents toward me. Her eyes were gleaming with suppressed excitement. It was the look of a predator watching its prey bleed out. I picked up the pen. My hand was shaking perfectly. I lowered the nib to the paper. Then I stopped. I let the pen drop. I looked up at them, blinking in confusion. "Wait," I muttered. I can't sign this without having it notarized by my attorney. The firm's bylaws. The board won't accept a transfer without Arthur's signature as a witness. I remember that. I remember. Damon's jaw clenched so hard, I thought his teeth would shatter. "Elias, Arthur isn't here. You can just sign it now, and we'll take it to him later." "No," I shouted, acting agitated and paranoid. No. Has to be Arthur. The rules. We have to follow the rules." Chloe put her hand over Damon's, giving him a warning look. She turned to me with a sickly sweet smile. "Okay, Dad, we'll get Arthur. I'll call him right now." "No," I insisted, standing up, my legs wobbling. "I have to do it in person. I have an appointment in the city tomorrow afternoon at 4 p.m., a checkup. I'll stop by Arthur's office after. I'll sign them there." Chloe's eyes narrowed. "Dad, you can't drive. You're too sick." "I can drive," I snapped offensively. "I'm not useless yet. I'm driving my own car. Tomorrow, 4 p.m. I stormed out of the office, slamming the door behind me. I went straight to my bedroom. pulled up the camera feed for the office on my phone, and put in my earpiece. On the screen, Damon was pacing furiously. He's fighting it. The thallium is making him paranoid. If he goes to Arthur's office, Arthur will see how sick he is. Arthur is a bulldog. He'll demand an independent medical evaluation before letting Elias sign away a $40 million trust. The whole plan falls apart. Chloe was sitting frozen in her chair, staring blankly at the wall. "He can't make it to that appointment," she said, her voice eerily flat. "How do we stop him?" Damon hissed. "Lock him in his room?" Chloe slowly turned to her husband. "He drives a vintage Porsche to the city. The one he keeps in the detached garage. The mountain road down to the valley is a 7-mile stretch of steep hairpins." Damon stopped pacing. The blood drained from his face as he realized what she was suggesting. "Chloe, that's if they investigate. It will look like a tragic accident," she replied coldly. A sick, confused old man who shouldn't have been driving lost control of his vehicle because his cognitive decline impaired his reaction time will be devastated. And as his soul heirs, the entire estate passes to us automatically. No signatures required. I sat on the edge of my bed, a physical chill radiating through my bones. I had given her the bait, and she hadn't just taken it. She had swallowed it whole. She was willing to orchestrate a fatal car crash rather than risk losing her payday. "Do you know how to do it?" Chloe asked him. Damon swallowed hard. "The brake lines. I can bleed them just enough so he has pressure for the first few miles. But once he hits the steep decline and rides the brakes, the line will blow. He won't be able to stop." "Do it tonight," my daughter commanded. "At 3 a.m., wear gloves." I took a deep breath, removed the earpiece, and picked up a burner phone I had purchased days earlier. I dialed Marcus, my security expert, and then I dialed Dr. Gregory, who immediately patched me through to the lead detective he had been working with in secret. The trap was set. At 3 a.m., my tablet glowed in the dark of my bedroom. I watched the live feed from the detached garage. Damon snuck in, wearing dark clothes and a surgical mask. He slid under my restored 1980 Porsche 911. He was under there for exactly 14 minutes. I watched him systematically compromise the brake lines, ensuring they would fail under heavy pressure. He wiped down the floor to ensure there were no visible puddles of brake fluid, then quietly snuck back to the house. He thought he was a genius. He didn't know that Marcus's security team had 3 different infrared cameras perfectly angled to capture his face, his tools, and his exact actions. The next day at 3:30 p.m., I walked into the kitchen. I was dressed in a sharp suit. I didn't fake a tremor. I didn't use a cane. I stood perfectly straight. Chloe and Damon were sitting at the island, drinking tea. They both stared at me, visibly shocked by my sudden vitality. "Wow, Dad," Chloe stammered. You look great. You had a lot of energy today." "I feel fantastic, sweetheart." I smiled warmly. "I think those smoothies of yours are finally working their magic. I'm going to head to the city now. I'll see Arthur, get these papers signed, and hand over the reins. You two have earned it." Damon's eyes darted nervously to Chloe. "Are you sure you want to drive the Porsche, Elias? The weather looks a bit gray." "I'm sure," I said, patting his shoulder. "It's a beautiful day for a drive." I walked out to the garage. I didn't get into the Porsche. Instead, Marcus and his team were waiting inside the garage. They had brought an identical enclosed car transport trailer. In complete silence, we loaded the sabotaged Porsche into the trailer. Then I climbed into the back of an unmarked black SUV with Marcus and 2 plainclothes police detectives. We have the garage footage. We have the kitchen footage. We have the audio, the lead detective said, looking at me with a mixture of awe and pity. "Are you ready, Mr. Thorne?" "Make the call," I said. We drove out of the state in the unmarked SUV, leaving the property quiet. We parked about 2 miles down the mountain road, hidden behind an old logging trail, and waited. Back at the house, a local police cruiser pulled up to the front gate exactly 20 minutes after I had left. I watched the live security feed from my iPad in the back of the SUV. Chloe opened the front door. A uniformed officer stood on the porch, holding his hat in his hands. He looked appropriately somber. "Ma'am, are you Chloe Thorne?" the officer asked. Chloe's hand flew to her mouth. She was an incredible actress. Yes? Is everything okay? What's wrong? I'm so sorry, ma'am. The officer said, his voice heavy. It's about your father, Elias. There was a terrible accident on the mountain pass. His vehicle's brakes appear to have failed. He went through the guardrail. Damon appeared behind her, his face a mask of shock. Oh, my God. Is he alive? He didn't make it, the officer said quietly. Chloe collapsed against the doorframe, wailing. It was a flawless performance. She sobbed, clinging to Damon, screaming my name. Damon held her, burying his face in her hair. But over her shoulder, the security camera caught Damon's reflection in the entryway mirror. He was smiling. It was a wide, relieved, sickening grin. Can we go to him? Chloe choked out between fake sobs. I need to see my father. Of course, the officer said. I'll need you both to come down to the station to identify some personal effects we recovered from the wreckage. Damon and Chloe grabbed their coats, playing the roles of devastated family members flawlessly. They got into the back of the police cruiser, holding hands, wiping away non-existent tears. They thought they had won. They thought they were $40 million richer. 30 minutes later, the cruiser pulled into the underground garage of the precinct. They were escorted up the elevator, not to morgue, but to an interrogation room. The detective left them alone in the room for 10 minutes. The hidden camera in the interrogation room streamed directly to my tablet in the observation room next door. As soon as the door closed, Chloe's tears instantly stopped. Her face dropped into a cold, hard mask. Did you clean up the garage? She whispered sharply. Yes, Damon hissed back. It's spotless. They suspect nothing. The cop said the brakes failed. It's over, Chloe. We did it. Chloe let out a long, shuddering breath of relief. She leaned back in her plastic chair and smiled. He was a pathetic old man anyway. I was tired pretending to care. The door to the interrogation room clicked open. Damon and Chloe immediately snapped back into character. Chloe forced tears into her eyes and looked up, but it wasn't the detective who walked in. It was me. I stepped into the cold, fluorescent-lit room, wearing my tailored suit, standing perfectly upright, without a tremor in my body. The silence that followed was the most absolute, deafening sound I have ever experienced. Damon literally stopped breathing. His eyes bugged out his head, his skin turning the color of wet ash. He stumbled backward, knocking his chair over with a loud clatter. Chloe just stared at me. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her brain simply could not process the impossible geometry of what she was looking at. A dead man, standing in front of her, looking healthier than he had in months. I calmly walked to the steel table and placed 2 items on it. The first was the tiny glass vial of Thallium she had hidden in the tea canister. The second was a USB drive containing the high-definition footage of Damon cutting my brake lines, and the audio of them plotting my murder. "Hello, sweetheart," I said softly. My voice was steady, betraying none of the absolute heartbreak crushing my chest. I didn't make it to my appointment. Dad. Chloe choked out, terror finally breaking through her sociopathic calm. Dad, I don't understand. You don't understand? I repeated, leaning over the table, my eyes locking onto hers. It's quite simple, Chloe. Thallium is a coward's weapon, and you are at your core a profound coward. Damon scrambled toward the door, panic overriding all logic. I need a lawyer. I want a lawyer right now. The door swung open, and 3 detectives stepped in, handcuffs already out. Damon Vance, the lead detective barked. You are under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and reckless endangerment. They slammed him against the wall, cuffing him roughly. Damon began to sob instantly, screaming that it was all Chloe's idea, that she made him do it, that she bought the poison. The alpha male venture capitalist vanished in seconds, replaced by a sniveling, terrified child. 2 officers stepped up to Chloe. She didn't fight. She didn't cry. She just stared at me, the mask completely destroyed, revealing the terrifying, hollow void beneath. I gave you everything, I whispered, my voice finally cracking. I took you out of hell. I gave you my name. I gave you my heart. Why, Chloe? For money? You already had everything. She looked at me, her eyes dead and cold. And in that moment, she decided to twist the knife one last time. "You didn't give me everything," she sneered, her voice dripping with venom. "You gave me your expectations. You wanted a perfect daughter to play house with. You and Sarah suffocated me with your perfect little lives. I just wanted my cut." Hearing Sarah's name in her mouth made my blood run cold. As they handcuffed her and led her toward the door, a terrifying, impossible thought struck me like lightning. "Wait," I said to the detectives. I walked up to Chloe, standing inches from her face. Sarah's heart failure. The coroner said it was sudden, unexplainable. Chloe stopped walking. A slow, sickening smile spread across her lips. "She found out I embezzled from the charity fund," Chloe whispered softly, so only I could hear. "She was going to kick me out, cut me off. I was 22, Elias. I couldn't let her do that." My lungs stopped working. "Thallium?" I choked out. "You used thallium on your own mother?" Chloe just smirked. "It mimics heart failure, if the dose is high enough. You should really check her medical records, Dad. It's amazing what doctors miss when they aren't looking for it." The detectives yanked her out of the room, leaving me standing alone in the interrogation room. The walls began to spin. The grief I thought I had conquered rushed back in like a tidal wave. My beautiful Sarah. My brilliant, loving wife. She hadn't died of a random medical tragedy. She had been murdered by the viper we had invited into our nest. I fell to my knees right there on the concrete floor, the reality of my life shattering around me. The trial was a media circus. The wealthy architect, the deceitful socialite daughter, the poisoned smoothies, the sabotaged Porsche. The press ate it alive. But I didn't care about the cameras. I only cared about the exhumation. Based on Chloe's taunt in the interrogation room, I fought the state to have Sarah's body exhumed. Dr. Gregory personally oversaw the new toxicology report. Even after 5 years, heavy metals leave a permanent signature in bone and hair tissue. The results confirmed my worst nightmare. Sarah's thallium levels were astronomical. Chloe hadn't just poisoned me slowly. She had given Sarah a massive, lethal dose all at once, triggering a catastrophic cardiac event. When the prosecution added first-degree murder to Chloe's charges, her expensive defense strategy completely collapsed. Damon, desperate to save himself from a life sentence, flipped on her entirely. He testified that she had bragged to him about how easily she had gotten away with killing Sarah, and how easily they could do the same to me. Damon received 25 years for his role in my attempted murder and the sabotage of my vehicle. Chloe didn't take the stand. She sat at the defense table, staring blankly ahead, showing absolutely no remorse. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. They found her guilty of first-degree murder, attempted murder, and conspiracy. The judge sentenced her to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. At the sentencing hearing, the judge asked if I wanted to make a victim impact statement. I walked up to the podium. The courtroom was dead silent. I looked at the woman sitting in the orange jumpsuit, the woman whose scraped knees I had bandaged, whose college tuition I had paid, whose wedding I had walked her down the aisle for. "For 22 years, I loved a ghost," I said, my voice echoing in the vast room. "I loved a daughter who never actually existed. The woman sitting here today is a stranger. She is a parasite who fed on the kindness of a woman, who only wanted to be a mother, and a man who only wanted to be a father. You took my wife. You tried to take my life. But you failed to take my legacy." I paused, looking her directly in the eyes. "I sold the firm yesterday. The estate has been liquidated. Every single dollar, all 40 million, has been placed into an irrevocable trust for foster children who age out of the system. Children who actually need help. Children who aren't monsters. You will spend the rest of your life in a concrete box, knowing that the empire you killed for is being given away to strangers." For the first time in the entire trial, Chloe's face broke. The realization that she had lost the money, the only thing she ever truly cared about, finally hit her. She lunged forward against her chains, screaming, her face contorted in absolute rage. The bailiffs dragged her out of the courtroom. I watched her go, and for the first time in years, I felt the heavy weight lift off my chest. It has been 2 years since the trial. I no longer live in the glass and steel mansion in the mountains. I sold it to a tech billionaire who liked the isolation. I bought a small, beautiful coastal house in Oregon, overlooking the ocean. My health is fully restored. The Prussian blue did its job, clearing the poison from my system, though my doctor says my heart will always carry some minor scarring from the ordeal. But I am alive. Every morning, I wake up, brew my own coffee, and walk out onto my deck to watch the waves crash against the rocks. I spend my days running Sarah's foundation, meeting with incredible, resilient kids who survived the foster system and are heading off to college, their tuition fully paid. I have found peace. Sometimes, late at night, I think about the little girl we brought home all those years ago. I wonder if the evil was always inside her, a dark seed waiting to bloom, or if the privilege of the life we gave her somehow mutated her soul. I will never know the answer, but I do know this. Blood doesn't make someone family. Love, loyalty, and respect do. I lost my family to greed, but in the aftermath, I built a new legacy, a legacy that no poison can touch and no betrayal can destroy. Justice isn't always about vengeance. Sometimes, true justice is simply surviving, walking away from the darkness, and refusing to let it turn you into a monster, too.